Hey, Kevin, welcome. Baha, Greg B, new names, new faces. Beautiful to meet everyone. All right, I'm going to share my screen. Can you give me sharing access, please, Sonia?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm making you a host now. You can start sharing your screen.
Thank you. I'll be mindful to keep admitting people. Okay, here we go. I'm going to share my window. Actually, I'm going to share Chrome tab, which is this one. Call series. Okay, cool. Oh, let's admit Jesse. Okay, you guys, welcome everybody. Happy Saturday. Thank you all for being here, for taking time on your weekend to join these very exciting calls. I'm admitting a few people in, so I'm going to do a little intro. My name is Oscar. I am a regenerative enthusiast. I'm a software engineer. I've been in the regenerative space for the last 7 years and working actively for the last 4 years to design and create a series of tools and resources that facilitate individuals to plan, design, and build regenerative neighborhoods. Locations that are good for the individual, good for the collective, and good for the planet. This is the simplest version of how I would explain it to my nephews. Um, Places that have resilient resource systems and have community lifestyle and amenities. This is the high level description of it. We have partnered with Chimera and Masterminding Eden as we have very aligned values and intentions of welcome, Dr. Brian. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being on the other side of the world and joining in the middle of the night. Appreciate it. Hey, Francis, thank you for being here. You know, Regen Warrior, helping with the design of regenerative systems. You guys will be doing some breakout rooms and everyone will have a chance to introduce each other and meet each other a little bit more. The goal of these calls is to gather this intersect of community-minded humans and regenerative-minded humans, all eager to design something new for society. At the base level, it's a regenerative individual lifestyle. One level up from that, it's a regenerative collective lifestyle with others. And one level above that is the place where we all live together, which is regenerative villages, neighborhoods, and eventually cities and a world. I appreciate Chimera's tenacity and diligence in driving forward the Masterminding Eden plan of building a framework for these kinds of spaces. We have very aligned interests. We've been working on something very similar for the last 4 years, a tool set, resource gallery, and now with AI and LLMs, we are taking this call initiative to gather one more round of resources and upload everything to a smart dynamic documentation, something that will facilitate anyone out there to not have to skim through hundreds of PDFs and books. Instead, they will be able to query an LLM and ask it specific questions about their projects, where they are on their project journey, and hopefully be pointed in the direction of very relevant resources from all of the builders, aficionados, and service providers, specialists, scientists that are out there with awesome content and knowledge that is all what we find very siloed, spread around WhatsApp groups, Facebook groups, and websites around the world. This is our first call series. Eric Amiot is here. Let me let him in. Hello, beautiful turnout today, you guys. Welcome. Happy Saturday. Thank you all for being here. We were just touching base on the purpose of the calls to A, gather these resources, B, upload them to a smart dynamic documentation set, and further steps after this is take this framework, design an actual plan for a physical location and create connection with this community as we're already working on something together. An authentic community comes from not just celebrating together, but also working on things together. And that's what these calls are for. Grateful for all of you being here. This is a second touch point on call two, which is now exploring what is a framework and what should be inside of our framework to build a regenerative society, regenerative neighborhoods, and regenerative future. Kim, would you like to share a little intro?
Hi, sorry I can't be on video today. My name's Chimera. I am an environmental science technologist in Canada. I'm also a regenerative hobby farmer, and I am also a beekeeper. And my interest is in designing self-sustaining communities that can help regenerate ecosystems and humanity's culture and consciousness while being climate resilient because we are beyond the tipping point of climate acceleration. So that's probably not even the right wording. Dr. Brian could speak more to the climate, but things are not going to get better in the near future. They're going to get worse, and we need to prepare for that, for wind, for flooding, for fires, for drought, for food shortages, for potential energy shortages and blackouts. And our infrastructure is not prepared for what we are currently facing. And so we need to change the way we build. And the best way that we could build is to make communities self sustaining and efficient and resilient. And that's why I am here. And I'm so glad to have Oscar running the call. And I will be here participating today. Thank you all so much for showing up.
Beautiful. Okay, so I'm just going to give a little screen share. Sonia, can you share the link to the Miro board, please? I'm going to share my screen for a second, and afterwards, I'm going to invite you guys all to jump onto the Miro board. This is going to be our digital playground where we will explore together and share our thoughts. When we go into the breakout rooms, we'll be dropping notes in there. It's an easy way to gather everyone's thoughts and knowledge into one space that we will be later on extracting and adding to the dynamic documentation set. I'll give you a little tour before you guys jump in there. We have the starting point up here, which shares the basic information of why we're here to create this framework, to gather as a community and share resources. In here, you can see all of the important links, the link to the Miro board, the link to the Zoom call, so you can share with others as we continue to grow our community, again, at this beautiful intersect of community-minded humans with regenerative mindsets. So that'll be there for you at all times. Here you can see the links to go straight to the active board, where the part of the board where we will be hosting the calls. Example, today we'll go to call two, and this will take you straight down to the board where we're going to be working on. We'll go back there in a second. Okay, let's go here. Here we share the big why of this framework call series. It's to gather resources, come together, and design the best process that we can to facilitate the creation of more of these locations. Some of these goals are connecting with the community through these calls and experiences, gathering resources from everyone that's here and all of the experiences that they've made so far, and then creating this open source and crowdsourced framework, all with the end goal of using this framework to build a plan, an actual plan for a physical location, a regenerative neighborhood in one place or multiple places, but starting with a very detailed and solid plan. And eventually gathering as a community to build this physical location, everything from legal to raising funds to being the boots on the ground builders, operators, and growth magicians for this community. How are we doing this? By collecting these resources on these series of calls. We'll discuss that a bit more later on we'll be discussing these topics: ecology, hardware, human systems, economy, and software. Each topic, category rather is the word we're using, will have 2 calls in this series where we will discuss theoretically what that topic is, what that category is, and what some of the subcategories are. So we can get more into the details of gathering resources. I'll show you a bit more what that's going to look like. Maybe we can dive in there. So this is a combination of multiple projects that we've been learning from, mixed with Chimera and Masterminding Eden's organization structure for the framework, and one we've been working on. These 5 categories do the best job that we've gotten to up to this point of naming everything it takes to design a new society. This graphic here starts with ecology, the core of what we're designing after being biophilic and using biomimicry for our design. The 3 components, which are hardware, human systems, and economy, and an underlayer of software to connect all of it and help us move in alignment and with logistic optimization. Each one of these on the Miro board actually links to a group that we are currently using a digital platform to gather resources and gather any kind of documentation anyone has to share. You're welcome to, for example, let's go here to hardware. This is one of my favorite ones, and master planning. You can click on the link here, and let me share this tab as it loads. And this will take you to the Tribes platform. This is a networking and education platform that we launched about 2 years ago. We have about 1,300 users and over 100 land projects that have been sharing their regenerative neighborhoods and projects and all of the resources that have helped them get there. As an example, you can explore this master planning group here in the document section. You can go in and see all of the documents that people have been uploading over the last couple of years, since 2023 when we launched up until today. Resources from how to lay out your master plan to specific examples of master plans that you can see from different land projects in different parts of the world. I can just click this one so you can check it out. You can open it. You can download the master plan to your drive and explore it fully. Each of these master plans have gold in them, things that worked for each one of these projects around the world. This one, as an example, is a project that seems to be in Panama. There's hundreds of PDFs, guides, books on this platform currently. Our heavy lift in the next couple of weeks will be to extract all of these resources and put them into the smart documentation that we were sharing earlier. We'll go more into detail on that soon. Let me finish here so we can jump straight into some community breakout groups and everyone can meet each other a little bit more. So the big what is the framework that we're working on. We know that there's resources all around the world. We know that there's amazing people all around the world working on these kinds of projects. And our goal now is to turn all of this into a digital brain. We have the resources, we have the knowledge, and now we have the tools. If data is the new gold, we now have the picks, the axes, and the sifters to make the most of all of this data that we are all holding on to. So this call series is a call to action to all of you. Thank you for being here to join, share your knowledge, and share any links or resources to any of the amazing content that has helped you learn and explore this space. All right, so that was a short intro. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to come back to the call. I'm going to create some breakout groups. I'm going to invite everybody here. Let me actually, one more second. Let me show you exactly where we'll be playing together here on the call. Down here, we're going to go to call 2. Call 2 is our framework call. I'm going to invite you guys all to click into that link that Sonia just shared in the Zoom call. I invite you guys to jump in there. I can see all of your little pointers running around, which is really fun. It's like we can see each other running around the classroom, you know, kind of a play on our inner child. To create during play is one of the best ways to create. So I invite you all to click into that link if you'd like. If you just want to watch and follow the journey, I'm going to be sharing this screen on the calls. Let's see. Everyone jump in that link. Did you share the link in the chat? Okay, sweet. All right, so we're here on the board. I'm going to go ahead and click into some, I'm going to create a few breakout rooms for everyone to jump into.
We can't find the link.
Oh, here. If you go to the chat here, Sonia, what chat? Here, what do you say the link is? Here, drop the link there. Okay, so Sonia just dropped the link into the chat. It's miro.com / a bunch of things. So go ahead and jump in there if you'd like. Also, feel free to tag along for the ride and watch my screen as I'm sharing. I see you in there, Brian. I see you in there, visiting designer, and Vic. Welcome, you guys. You guys zoom out and go to the call to area of the board. This is where we're going to be working. Again, another little piece of tour here. We have already started breaking down the board into their respective sections. I see you guys all popping in there. If you scroll up a little bit or down a little bit, I see where most of you are. Eric, Kevin, if you guys move up a little bit, yeah, there you go. Call two, you're going to navigate past call two. That's where we'll be working today and dropping our collective knowledge in. A little zoom out of the board. You'll see that we have already, if you zoom out, you can see kind of the big image here. We've already set up the categories that we will be working on in the following weeks. In case any of you have amazing resources or links to projects that you would like to share, the easiest way for you to share that is here on the Miro board. Feel free to drop links on the left side of ecology or hardware. To kick off, we're going to move on to week 2 board. Perfect. I see everybody's in there already. You're checking out the welcome. The goals for this call, as we discussed before, is to connect with the community. We'll do that in some breakout groups in a minute, to create resources and to understand what is a framework, discuss what should be in our framework, and share any frameworks that you know of that currently exist in this space. All right, so without any further ado, I'm going to create some breakout groups. There's 30 plus of us on the call. So I think maybe like 6 or 7, maybe 8.
Yeah, I don't think you need to assign the note takers unless you want to match them to.
I'm not assigning them. I'm just doing breakout groups and letting them go, assigning automatically. So I'm going to create 7 breakout groups. So there'll be about 5 people in each room, 4 to 5, maybe here. I'm going to do 8 breakout groups and we'll see how they go. So our goal here is going to be to meet each other, discuss a little bit. What led you to this call? What are you excited about today? And have you lived in a community before? Also, feel free to share where your location is currently. I'm going to start this timer. Yep.
There's really only like 20 people because there's 10 AI note takers. So take that into account.
Okay. Perfect. I'm going to do 6 breakout groups then. Maybe 5.
And then you need to make sure that there's at least 2 people per group, note takers.
Sure. Okay. Well, check in on the note-taking situation, or I can assign manually.
Yeah, you can assign manually.
Let participants choose a room. Okay, I'm going to assign manually. Give me a minute. I'm going to put you all into breakout groups. I'm going to do the automatic thing. It's usually pretty good. If you're in a group, if you're in a room with only note takers, feel free to jump out and jump into another group. Let's see how this goes. Everyone jump in. Our goal is intros right now. Introduce yourself. Let everybody know what led you to this call, what you're excited about, and have you lived in community before and where you are. I'm going to start a timer. Everyone get about 1 minute in the group, and I'll check back in with you in a couple of minutes. Here we go. I'm opening all the rooms. They're being assigned.
Hey, Oscar. I got put in a breakout room. Hi.
Hi. Hey, Sol.
All note takers, so I have no one to talk to.
Okay, so can you see the other rooms or no?
Let me see. No.
No. Okay, let me see how I can.
Breakout room 2.
Okay, let me see how I can. Let's see. There's some people jumping onto the call right now. I think they're gonna show up in here. Hello, you guys. Welcome, welcome. We're currently in breakout groups, and I'm figuring out how to put. Okay, so I see you here. I'm gonna move you into room. I'm gonna move you into room. Yeah, I see this one is like almost all note takers. Room 2 is almost all note takers.
Yeah, that's the one I was put in.
Okay, so I'm gonna move you into room 1.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for letting me know. Okay, who else is in here in the waiting room? Lori. Hey, Lori. Okay, Lori, I'm gonna send you into a group as well. Let me see. I see you, Lori. I'm gonna send you to group 3. Okay, who else is in this waiting room right now? Let me BVK and M12 August. Hey, August, I'm gonna put you in group 5. BVK, I'm gonna put you in groups 4. Okay, is anyone in this main? Okay, who's in here? Hey, M12 the El Habib. Thank you for being here. We're in this main room right now. I don't know if Vitaly, are you there, my friend? Greg B, are you guys in here? Do you guys want to be assigned to a room? In the meantime, I'm doing a live here on Instagram. What's up, you guys? We are currently doing a call online. Here is the call where we are gathering as a community to discuss regenerative neighborhoods and all of the components of designing a regenerative neighborhood and the framework to make it easier for others to build them. I'm going to share a link down here for you guys where you can see the link to the call and you can join if you'd like directly onto the call. RNF calls. Let's see, HTTPS. Boom. Let me double check that's the email. 1 second. Dash calls. Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay, I've sent a link in the chat if you guys are up for that. What's up, Matt? So this is a live where I'm just broadcasting to let you guys know we're doing a call. We're on the call on Zoom if you'd like to join the Zoom. It's a lot of moving pieces right now. The rooms are going good, it seems like. Yeah, where are you coming from, M12 Del Habib? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Algeria.
Algeria. Okay, beautiful, beautiful. How's the regenerative movement going out there?
Good.
Good. Okay, beautiful. Well, thank you for joining. Is there anything you're interested in specifically? I'm going to put you in a group here in a second so you can listen in. Seems like group 1 is probably the best. Group 5, cool. Greg, I don't know if you're in here. Vitaly, if you're in here, let me know. I'm going to try to send you guys to a group as well. I'm going to start jumping into the other groups. Okay, you guys, everyone that's heading back to the main room, welcome, welcome, welcome. We will be here in a minute. Bunch of AI assistants. Happy that everybody's recording. Amazing, amazing, amazing. The breakout rooms will be done in just a few seconds. For everyone tuning in on Instagram, welcome. Thank you for being here. We're hosting this call series of Regenerative Neighborhood Framework creation. If you'd like to join, and the link is in the chat downstairs. We're about to kick off the main portion of this workshop. Okay, let me share my screen. Chrome tab, boom, share.
Hello.
Okay, you guys, hello, hello, hello. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome back.
It was really lovely meeting everybody. Something that I want to share from this short conversation is that I realized that some of you are feeling the urgency coming from different, very bizarre things happening all around the world. We know what's happening in the United States. There's obviously a lot of military conflict happening in different places in the world. There's Iran, there's Palestine, and many other places that are dealing with very challenging social, political situations. And so, yeah, it's interesting to see how motivated we are in a state of conflict to come together and work on a future that will propose something more healthy and considerate of the individual collective into the Tribes platform so that we can have a repository of all the amazing humans that are here. But it would be nice to be able to connect after the call.
Okay, you guys, so welcome back to the main room. Is everybody here? Is my camera on? Yeah, okay, cool. I'm sharing my screen. Let me stop sharing my screen for a second. Okay, you guys, so welcome back to the main room. How was that breakout session? Did everyone get a minute to meet each other? I know we only got 5 or 6 of each other. Kevin, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Oscar. I had a question for you and Kamara in terms of, framework development. And because I know a good deal of this work had already been started, like Stephen Streetman is in the core team on the masterminding side, and right. And so work had been done. To what extent is the framework tethered into the individual, and how aligning is the individuals who would make up these regenerative communities to the framework, or is the framework an externality to who we are? Because I think part of the problem of the toxic societies we're dealing with around the world is that they reflect where people are. And so in other words, there is a crisis of personal awareness. There's a crisis of who we are. There's a lot of people who have disconnected with how they exist every day, and this avatar that they perceive as who they are, right? And if our framework doesn't hit at that level to get people to remember who they are, to come back into their humanity, into the fact that they breathe the same air, and they don't create that air, right? That kind of thing, then who are we going to? We're not doing this work just for folks who already get it. We're doing it's 8.3 billion people on this planet. We want our brothers and sisters to participate. So that needs to be a part of the framework. And I wanted to know how much on the very foundation of the participants is the framework tethered to that, is aligning all the way through.
Can you ask me the question clearly so I can understand? I received a lot of that and I agree with many pieces of that. What is the question?
The question is, to what extent, okay, we could come up and bring talented people together as you've done to create a framework.
Sure.
And that can be external to who people are because it's untethered. In other words, it's like imagine something built without a foundation. The foundation is the people who are going to make up this community, and
Sure.
their virtues and their values are what's going to make it a regenerative community. And so, to what extent are we steeping the frameworks that we're creating in getting people to align with who they are, getting people to remember the virtues that allowed humanity to survive as long as it has. Right? We've gotten away from that in modern society, and that's my question to you.
Yeah,
sure. So
why we have an entire call. There's 2 calls that are on like human culture, and so it's important: healing, spirituality, personal growth, dealing with the embedded trauma that I think we have from just living in the world as it is today. It's all an integral part of the framework. And
very much, Kevin, it's a good question. I'm sharing my screen right now. If you guys can see, in the human system section, which is actually one of the more robust categories with the most amount of subcategories, because we wanted to create specific spaces for what you're asking about, Kevin. Everything from not just your mental health and physical health, but also your emotional health and your spiritual development, whatever level of involvement you'd like to give that. I would say, basis of a regenerative society starts with a regenerative mindset individual and those values. The goal of these calls is that everyone gets to share their perspective on their priorities and their values. This is an experiment. My hypothesis is that because we are all very aligned, I know many people personally that are on this call, and the work that we're all doing leads me to believe that we will find so much in common as we share this. And the best way for us to explore that is by putting all of that content together in one place and being able to process it as a whole. Thanks to the new technologies of LLMs, when I started this project 4 years ago, I found that a quite daunting topic. How do we get everyone's ideas into one place and turn it into a single concept? I didn't worry about it much. I just started gathering resources. And 2 years after that, AI and LLMs became a thing. And 2 years later, I'm using them actively and seeing how they can actually take a group of 150, 1,000, a million individuals. And if everyone uploads their thoughts, their values, their principles into one location as they want to get involved with a physical community or a digital community, these LLMs will be able to mold and make sense of that information so we can make actionable, take actionable steps on that data. I don't know if that answers the question in some way, but that's kind of how I'm seeing it right now. If that clarifies anything for you. Did it? Okay. So does anyone have any questions, any comments on that? It's nice to kind of get everyone in the group.
I just wanted to make a comment that like group meetings like these and interactive experiences with a whiteboard just to have people refine what they're looking for and expand into the community, whatever kind of extensional information that can help others. I think this is a good first step for what the SIR's offering. And I think it's almost like a trial by fire thing, and we'll have to figure out what kind of social dynamics work best and learn with the technology as it grows.
Yeah, I agree. I agree deeply. Right. It's going to be a journey. Right. This is, from my experience, this is the initial calls of a group of people coming together. If maybe we all create one physical location together, or maybe we branch and create a couple of physical locations, and each one of them is in a geographic location that's more realistic for each of us. And this is kind of what this journey will hopefully play out on. What we get to leverage now is data, big data, as much data as we can gather and as much of that content to make actionable steps on. On my screen, I'm going to be sharing now this first jump into that. On the board, I have the question: what is a regenerative society, a regenerative neighborhood, a regenerative community, and a regenerative life? I think this is what you were touching on, Kevin. Like, is it a series of values? So we did a test call 2 weeks ago on this exact topic. You can see the board here, what everybody answered. I have now created a board here for call 2, where I invite all of you that are participating on this call to take a Post-it, drag it over here, and share your answer to this exact question, which is, what is a regenerative society? What is a regenerative neighborhood, a regenerative community, and a regenerative life? Anything from sharing your values to goals that you have, like growing food together or raising children together, to any other kind of interesting topic that you feel forms a regenerative community, neighborhood, life, individual, collective, all of it. I'm going to set a timer here for 4 minutes. I invite you all to start pulling Post-its. If you guys are all navigated, let me see if you can all see. Yeah, we're there on call 2. If you scroll to the right, you can follow all the little arrows. We're all kind of hive mentality coming around this same calling card right now, which I love to see. Gets me super excited to see everyone sharing their thoughts. Go ahead. I'm going to set this timer for 4 minutes. Oh, it's already running. We have 3 minutes, 30 seconds. Go ahead and share again. The question is, what is a regenerative society, a regenerative neighborhood, a regenerative community, or a regenerative life? All of this data, our goal is to extract and put into this dynamic documentation set that I would love anyone who is interested in learning on how to leverage LLMs to process data efficiently. I'll be doing work sessions on this process later on during the week. If anyone's interested, feel free to DM me, send me some messages. We'll have a little sign up so that you guys can stay in tune when we're doing that kind of work and seeing how we're going to take all of these nodes and clump them together to create our digital brain of the regenerative design. Go ahead and drop anything. If anyone wants to share, by all means, go ahead. I've been taking up a lot of talking space. I'd love to hear more from all of you. I know while we're writing, most people are a little bit quiet, but if anyone has anything to share along these lines, feel free.
I actually, if you could just ask the question and then have some quiet space so that people can think, because for me personally, if somebody's talking, I can't focus on what I'm trying to think and write.
Okay, fair. So the question is, you as an individual, what is a regenerative society? What is a regenerative neighborhood or community or lifestyle? Anything that you feel embodies what we're trying to create, any specifics,
okay, we got it.
Data works. I'm going to add a little more time, so we'll have about 3 minutes.
There's some really loud banging going on.
Okay, I'm going to give it 30 more seconds, you guys. Get your last cards up. All right, great. So we got a bunch of content in here. I love to see it, you guys. We will be taking all of this and uploading it to that dynamic documentation set that we shared about. I'll be sharing links to that and our journey through that. I'm going to be doing my best to document it while we're working on it so everyone can follow along and participate in the next steps. Okay, beautiful. I'm going to read off a few of the answers in here. So the question was, what is a regenerative society, neighborhood, community, or life to you? Some of the answers on here are imitating or simulating nature. Yes. In service to life in all aspects. Definitely a little rough around the edges. Always work in progress. Dynamically balanced, closed loop ecosystems. Regenerative means to recreate something. Is that what we mean to do? Do we really want our language to direct us into regenerating what we already have, which clearly is not working? Yeah, Vic, that's a good perspective. Reciprocity between people and place. Yes. Building and living harmoniously with Mother Earth. Shared humanity of all races, genders, global unity of perspective with scientific principles driving us forward. Beautiful, beautiful. Eric, if one considers there is nothing to fix to begin with, one might consider regeneration should see to generation of life and abundance with all actions. Yep. All right, these are really, really good answers, you guys. Regenerative society comprised of a group of people whose values and virtues align, right? This is what we're doing right now. Okay, beautiful. This is awesome content. And again, the goal that I see is taking all of this, uploading it to this brain, and being able to ask it questions to best summarize and give us data. That'll be happening on another call. I'll invite you guys all to join as we plan that out. For now, let's keep going with everyone's experience being shared on the board. I'm going to invite you guys all to scroll to the right as we're going to go into our next question. So, humans create from what they know most of the time. Some are very imaginative and can create completely new and abstract things. But for the most part, the bell curve of humanity creates what it knows and what it sees. So, with that question in mind, I would like to invite you all to, on this official call number 2 space where Kevin is. Yep, Eric, you're there now. Eric as well, you all there. I invite you guys all to share any community land projects that you know of, physical locations that you have either visited, maybe you've built one, maybe you just are following a project on Instagram, on Facebook that you are obsessed with and want to visit or have been a part of. I invite you guys all. I'm going to set a timer here. If you have their Instagram, if you have their LinkedIn or their Facebook or any kind of website, I invite you to share it here and drop it in as the resource gallery of existing projects that we can use as examples. One of my favorite is TDF in Portugal. Awesome project, regeneration at heart, integrating technology. Key example for me as one of them. I invite you guys all to share. We have a couple of minutes. answer this so we can bring it that way so people can see the column. It's kind of hard for me. All right, cool. Yeah, great, you guys. I'm seeing awesome things in here. Playa Viva in Mexico, Crystal Waters, Queensland. Didn't know about that one. Thank you for whoever shared that one. That's awesome. Okay, someone Queensland. Nice. You guys are sharing a bunch of stuff in Oz. Beautiful. Melidora and Victoria. Cool. Okay, nice. Culture. Taiku. Beautiful. Mystical Yoga Farm. Awesome. Yep. I'll go forest now. Sweet. Yeah, keep them coming, you guys. We got a couple minutes left. Okay, so what I need to do now is this and this. Yes, you guys feel free to share anything if you have any questions or any comments. I'm setting up our next little work block area. Hey, about 1 minute, you guys. Feel free to go into your Instagrams, grab links, drop links in here as well. That'd be beautiful. That'll help us, gather content. We'll be doing a little tour of the Tribes platform after this next session to show you guys where, if you want to take a little more time and upload PDFs and other bigger content, where you can do that and how you can do that. Also, it'll be a really beautiful place, as we met in the groups a few minutes ago and we got just a glimpse of each other. On the Tribes platform, there's a very robust profile bio section where you can share everything from your desired community to where you want to be in the world, to what your passions and projects that you're working on are. And that way we can get to know each other a little bit more as well, with a digital kind of community space. All right, 30 seconds, you guys. And we're gonna All right, cool. All right, awesome, you guys. All right, so this is amazing. We got a bunch of projects, a bunch of new ones I've never seen. I'm excited to comb through this. A bunch in Australia and in Oceania, which I'm excited to add. Yes, India, Oroville, the farm in Tennessee. Beautiful. I haven't really explored many projects in the US. This is great. Yeah, get your last ones in there. Barichara bioregion, beautiful. Okay, sweet. So now that we've explored a bit about what high level theoretically is a regenerative everything, and have shared some specific examples of locations that are embodying some or all of those principles, our next goal is going to be to focus on the concept of a framework. So can anyone in the group at a glance tell us what their understanding of a framework is? Any key components. In our next session, we're going to be breaking it down into some of the key things that we've, extracted from the internet and other participants on calls. Does anyone have a succinct way of sharing what they feel a framework is? If anyone would like to share.
Oscar, I can leap in there because we use frameworks in commercial banking. So if looking at it from like a legalistic structure, a framework is sort of like your constitution. It's an overarching strategic document that lays out, depending on what you're talking about, the core principal things that would comprise the structure of what you're talking about. And underneath that framework, once it lays out that structure and the strategic approach, all your laws and your policies and your procedures fall within the context of that framework. So it is the exoskeleton of whatever you're trying to build.
Okay, beautiful. Yeah, exoskeleton makes a lot of sense, right? The the infrastructure, you could say that then you add meat to the bones of, right? In the sense of an exoskeleton or an inner skeleton. Yep, I agree. Okay, so anyone else?
I was going to say, I like the Constitution example because kind of a framework is usually making some simplifying assumptions. And so, like the Constitution says, this Article 1 and Article 2 and Article 3 explain how these branches of government work. But in reality, there's so much more going on there than you could possibly put into one document. But you get it down to the core principles that are the very core guiding elements of it. And so you can get, it's a little bit of an abstraction. It doesn't really exist because like it's a piece of paper, but it's also very powerful and it exists in its influence of getting people on the same page and coordinating in the same fashion. And so I think that's what I think of when I think of a good framework, is being able to go from kind of create something that's not real, but that's so good in terms of how it organizes everything that it makes itself real and how powerful it can be to kind of coordinate and organize.
Cool. Yeah, good. Yeah, Logan, I love how you said it helps us coordinate to create something similar and aligned. Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Brian.
Building on both of these suggestions, it's clear that a framework could benefit from a defined vision, mission, and aims. Those are the guiding principles that Sociocratic Circle could use to make decisions and to refine proposals and to achieve consent. And those are governance frameworks that work extremely well. I could even see us dividing into several circles that interact together. And at the scale of half a dozen to 2 dozen people, sociocratic circle method is highly robust. At the nation state or network level, we've seen excellent examples from people like Audrey Tang with modern polity, citizens' assemblies, and pluralism as they have developed on GitHub. Thanks.
Okay, beautiful. I would love some of those links, Dr. Brian. Whenever you want to share that, I invite you to explore the board down here. In each of these white cards, we have the macro categories. If you have some links you'd like to share, that'll warm us up on content. We'll go over a little bit soon on how to drop more specific content.
Excellent.
Okay, cool.
So, could I throw in my 2 cents on framework? It's Vic here.
Yeah, sure, Vic. And then Francis after. Go ahead, Vic.
Okay. So I've been studying frameworks, and one of the things I have an objection to framework is that it's a rigid structure that defines hierarchy unconsciously. Now, hierarchy is very important, but it is not the only thing. And organisms do not grow with frameworks. Frameworks is an outcome of an organic process. It's not the starting point. So I'm just proposing or asking the question of what other language can we use that defines a more organistic language in addition to framework so that we don't get caught in hierarchies and siloing. My thoughts.
You have any suggestions?
Organism, cell membrane, these to study the language of things that grow and put them into our language along with, I'm not saying replace framework, but along with, think about how does the cosmos grow itself? It's not by frameworks.
Yeah, nature is profoundly non-hierarchical, and it uses networks, like mycelial networks, as an alternative to hierarchy.
Mycelia is a great example of a living organism. Bingo.
Yeah, Francis, I'd love to hear your take on this as a regen practitioner and from all the experience you have.
Well, I guess it depends on, from the perspective that you're looking at it from. I'm looking at it as tools that allow us to manage complexity at different levels. So tools, processes, guidelines that enables us to actually go out there and manage different levels of complexity at higher echelons of that from a regenerative development perspective.
Okay. Yeah. So all of these are correct, in my opinion. All of these perspectives on what a framework is, what it helps us do. From so far, what we've gathered from these calls and from this is the main components of a framework. As we break it down as bite-sized chunks, is a framework helps define a purpose, just like an organism has a purpose. Different cells, different, full biological creatures. A framework also helps define the metrics of success. How do we track progress of whatever entity is being defined by this framework, whatever organism it is? How do we track its progress and its success? Breaking it down into categories, right? It's hard to deal with all of the silverware in one drawer. But when we have a silverware splitter and we know where the spoons are and the forks and the knives, it facilitates use and organization. So categories of this is another component of a framework. Also, from other books and guides that we've seen and been processing so far, a framework helps define a process, a journey to take all of that information and shape that organism into its process. You could consider that maybe to be the genetic sequence, or, I love this analogy to an organism, Vic. Biophilia here, and biomimicry in all ways. It's a magical way to approach this. Also, a framework helps define the roles and responsibilities of how this organism will work, right? I'm now imagining a cell in all of these conversation and defining what the different membranes do and what the different micro components of a cell do. So we're going to break out into these small breakout groups where I would love, or, I don't know if, Cam, you shared that maybe breakout groups, we can just stay together in the group and see everyone working around. It might be nice for people to go into breakout groups and have conversations. These will be, let's see, how are we on time? We have about 30 minutes left for the call, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. That kind of finishes there. And then we have, okay, so I'm going to drop the time down a little more. It's good you guys have started on the purpose already. I'm going to start a timer. I'm just going to keep us all in the same group. I'm going to start a 2-minute timer where I'm going to invite you guys all to answer the questions. If you're seeing my screen, or a little bit underneath here where we have official call 2, I see a lot of you guys are still here on the previous little workboard. If you guys can navigate over here, there you go. Eric, you're in the right place. Eric, Logan, you're in the right place. Vic, to your left. There you go. Up a little bit. Kevin, everyone else, move over to your right. I'm going to leave a 2-minute timer where I'd love you guys to start sharing these answers. A, what do you find to be the purpose of why a regenerative neighborhood exists? We kind of touched on that, on what a regenerative neighborhood is and all of those questions. I invite you guys all, you can, go ahead and make these boxes bigger if you'd like. We're going to do 2-minute sprints on each one of these questions. Question 1, what is the purpose of a regenerative neighborhood? I've seen a lot of you already adding things. So like this will kind of align on the big why. Consider that to be purpose, right? Everyone's in that same spot right now. Perfect, beautiful. Keep adding things in there. The next 2-minute session will be metrics of success, and then categories, and then process, and then roles and responsibilities. I'm going to set the first timer. It's running. Go ahead and add purpose. If you guys want to jump around to the other ones because you're inspired, I invite you to. This is open range, Montessori school, green school style. Explore, share, and add anything. That seems aligned. We're on the first 2-minute block. I'm going to keep it quiet. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask questions. We're here to gauge them. So we're working on purpose. Why does a regenerative neighborhood exist? Feel free to add any content in there that you guys like. All right, 30 seconds, you guys. Add any other thing you feel aligned and very strong about. What is the purpose of a regenerative neighborhood? All right, 20 seconds, 20 seconds. And if you'd like, continue on to the next one that we'll be answering, which is metrics of success. How do we track the progress of a regenerative neighborhood? If you want some inspiration, you can look above where we did the test call last week. You can see what other people have shared. Here we go. All right. That was our first 2-minute window. Beautiful. So purpose, the big why of community. To provide ecological balance, yes. To actively contribute to the health of a broader ecosystem, yes. Liberation, equality, yes. To live in harmony, to provide energy, food, yes. Beautiful, 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 you guys. All right, cool. So next question is the metrics of success. Up here, we defined it, how to track progress. What are the metrics? Specific requirements, tools evaluations, see some examples above. And I'm going to set this 2-minute timer. You guys go ahead and add anything that you feel is a great way to track the progress and the success of a regenerative neighborhood. We're here in this one. I just learned how to bring everyone to my screen, which is cool. And we're all here. Metrics of success. Okay, nice, nice, nice. Over here. All right. We have about 30 seconds, you guys. 30 seconds. Use that full metrics. Cool. Longevity of residence. Yes, longevity of residence. Work hour efficiency per task. Yes, some form of tracking things, definitely. Index that folds several metrics into one meta metric. Yeah, right. Normalization of data. Super important if we really want to scale this globally so we can understand each other, definitely. Demonstration of resilience and repeatability. Yep. Deep index. Nice, nice, nice. Okay, the overall well-being of women. Yeah, definitely. Self-report. Yeah, right. Self-analysis of things. Absolutely. Multi-generational. Cool. Okay, nice. All right, so we're going to this next section. So categories, right? Categories, if you look at the top screen, I'm going to bring everyone to my screen for a second. Don't be alarmed when I move you. Bring everyone to me. Boom. All right, so here are the current categories that we're working with. All of these are linked to the Tribes platform where you can upload content directly. So Inspired by these categories, ecology, hardware, human systems, software, and economy, if there are any subcategories that you don't see on here, as an example, someone here in hardware added aesthetics, which I think is a critical one, specifically as Maslow's hierarchy. One of the levels is aesthetic. If you think of any subcategories in any of these macro categories or any macro categories, feel free to add them. You can check out what other people shared on last call and go ahead and start adding any categories you feel are important. We'll be mixing all of these. I'm going to invite you guys to join downstairs. Yes, let me let people in, or people not.
Yeah, some people get kicked off Miro whenever they click the link.
Yeah.
I would just try to copy and paste in a separate tab rather than opening it straight from Zoom.
Oh, okay. Okay, so timer is running, you guys. Actually, it's not. Let me make sure it's running. Okay, cool. Yeah, if you think of any other categories, feel free to add them. Any subcategories, we'll be doing our best to sort this and organize it. Yep, based on those categories. If you can think of anything else, it's kind of crammed down here. Brian, I see you in there. I invite you guys all to drop your thoughts down here in the designated area. I'm going to bring you again to my screen. Boom. There you go. We're here. Go ahead and drop any additional subcategories or categories that you think are very relevant and important, so that we have, right, a place for each thing and each thing in its place. And this is my best way of approaching complex system design. Okay, cool. I'm loving seeing all these answers you guys are putting in here. Right, timer's up. In hardware, robotics, yes, agreed. In software, AI development, definitely agree with that. I can't believe we don't have that right now. Let's see what's in there. Right, data robotics. Yeah, sure, AI for sure. Critical one. Oh yeah, here, large language models and artificial intelligence. We have that one. Okay, thought we missed it. Sweet. Okay, sweet. Yeah. Nice. Augmented reality. Yep. Agreed. Water systems, yes. Pond creation, yes. Human systems, peace and reconciliation process. Yeah, agreed, right? We're humans. We're volatile at times. And, being able to say, I'm sorry and come back together is part of the human journey, deeply, for sure. Okay, you guys, nice. All right, so the next question that is a super important one for us right now is the process. How do we implement the framework? As Regen Tribe, we have gathered what we call the Alchemy Guide, an 11-step journey for creating a community. We know other projects that have done the same. Jevity is working on something like this with Steven. There's another, TDF wrote a book called Designing Regenerative Communities. And if any of you know the Aravana project and the framework and process guide that they're creating, if any of you guys know of any great resources like that, even the UN Sustainable Goals, those are great ones as well. If you guys know of any processes, how to implement frameworks, guides, tools that help people take their idea and turn it into a real plan and a real place, this is the place for that. I've set the timer. Any links are super helpful. You guys are also welcome to fill in other spaces, any previous ones. But right now, the timer is set for the processes section. Let's see. We have a list here of right, Orchid City from last time. Kamara shared. Yeah, One Community Global is an epic one that inspired me from the very beginning of my journey in this space. Cool. Yeah. Nice, you guys. Yeah, keep it going. We have about a minute in that section. And again, if anyone has any questions or wants to share anything with the group, feel free, raise your hand, go ahead and drop some comments. And
Oscar, you're muted, I think.
I'm doing a live stream as well, trying to harvest all the magic from our community. I'm just pointing them over to the Zoom right now. Me, you guys keep jotting stuff down. All right, cool, you guys. So also invite you guys, help us out by, I see someone put One Earth. Great. If you have links for any of this stuff, a website or an Instagram or a Facebook group, please drop them in here. That's going to help our process a lot on the documentation step of creating that smart document later on, which again, invite if anyone is into LLMs and wanting to learn, we're exploring various tools on how to make the most of sets of data that feel, overwhelming, and using LLMs to process them effectively. Okay. All right. So now we're moving into the next section, which is roles and responsibilities. We had a huge kind of engagement on this one last week. I'm going to bring you guys all to my screen real quick. So roles and responsibilities. This little mind map here that you're seeing on the screen is our most normalized description of the key stakeholders that it takes to operate a community space. Everything from community management to the venue, to the sustainable systems, the kitchen, marketing, and space maintenance. I invite you guys all to harvest any experiences you've had with key people that it takes to create or manage a community. Explore some of the ones that people shared last week. We had a ton of great shares from the community. And I invite you guys to share any key roles or responsibilities that you feel are critical in this journey to manage a community, manage a bigger space, a project, anything that you can think of. Go ahead and add your resources here, add your thoughts. I've set the timer. Actually, I didn't. Where's the timer? Lost it. Oh, here it is. There you go, 2 minutes. Share any roles or responsibilities that you think are critical in this journey. Right, the heart lead, definitely. Okay, cool. And if you guys can think of anything else that we should add to a framework, to what a framework is, that we should be tracking, go ahead and add that in the next column. Kind of the catch-all, the junk drawer. I don't want to call it the junk drawer, but like the little bit of everything drawer. If you can think of anything we haven't talked about, go ahead and drop it in here. We're going to be doing our best with the LLM to make sense of all of this information. That's going to be, the really fun part of this journey after the calls that we'll be working on. And again, open invite. If anyone wants to get involved with that step, let us know. Yeah. I'm going to do the onboarding now. So tries. Sure. We have 30 seconds, you guys. Add anything to roles, responsibilities that you feel are key. Let's see. Energy circle. Yes. Food circle. Labor circle. Definitely. Precision agrivoltaic system. Yes. Very cool. Love the idea of solar panels providing shade and being able to grow food underneath. That's something I haven't worked on yet, but I'm very excited to. R&D, tech development, yes. Fermentation team, absolutely. Here for the fermented cabbage all day. Cultural diplomat, yep. Cool. Okay, sweet. Yeah, if anything else, catch-all comes up. I'm going to give another 30 seconds, you guys. Catch-all, anything else that we haven't discussed or hasn't been dropped in here, go ahead and drop it in this last column. Anything else we should add? Column. Cool. Get in there. We have the guidelines. Cool. Yeah, the next question we've already done, which is existing frameworks. I'm going to skip that and I'm going to go straight to... Okay, cool, you guys. So I'm going to rally us back together. Traditionally, we would take a little 1-minute break. Let's see. We have only 8 minutes left on the call. So yeah, let's do a 1-minute stretch. I invite everyone to get up on their chair. If you guys want to do a little bounce, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to jump around for a minute and shake it out. 30 seconds, 10 seconds. I invite you guys to do the same if you'd like. Get a little blood flow in your system. Oh, yeah. We got to keep the brain oxygenated. All right. We're back. Yeah, I get it, Kevin. All right, cool. All right, so we are back. I'm going to share my screen again. Boom. Let's try to get through the last piece. All right, so we've shared a lot of magic on this call, a lot of really great information, and many minds make great thoughts. And so on this journey, we also want to get to know each other as individuals. I'm going to do a little walkthrough of the Tribes platform, which is our current solution of a data repository. I'm going to kick off here. So can you share a link to the Tribes platform in the chat, Sonia? I'm going to go here, Tribes platform, and I'm going to share this tab instead. Okay, you guys. So I gave you guys a little peek at the Tribes platform earlier. It's beautiful to see the active users on the Tribes platform right now. Gets me super excited. This is a networking tool that we launched 2 years ago in an effort to bring resources in. When you go to tribesplatform.app, I'm going to leave the next 2 minutes for everyone to go to that link. On there, you can share your profile of who you are as an individual. Can you share the link for the Masterminding eating group? That would be the good one where everyone is fresh there and we can see each other on this journey of the framework. So I invite you guys all to go ahead and create your profile. Just to create your profile, it's your username and your email. I'm going to show you, once you log in, you'll have a little pop-up on the left that will share the completion level of your profile. where it's based on a very rich series of questions for bio, where you can share everything from where you are, who you identify with as one of the archetypes, as landowner, vision holder, community member, service provider, regen curious. You can share your magic, your passion, your purpose and interests, life experiences that you've had, a bio about yourself, describe yourself however you'd like. You can describe your dream community. This is a key data point for us to be able to match individuals with land projects and the projects that we will be designing and building. Also, you can share here your requests and offers that go ahead. Does anyone? No? Okay. Okay, so yeah, I'm giving a little tour of the Tribes platform. This bio will allow us all to meet each other a little bit deeper, see who we're getting to know. If the further steps of this, like Eric suggested on the first call I ever joined, was the end goal of this should be to create physical locations. I deeply agree with that. The world needs to see more successful prototypes and pilot-sized projects of regenerative neighborhoods, villages, and cities at scale. So I'd love for you guys to create your profile, update your profile, and then join the Masterminding Eden group. This is where we can all see each other. Specifically, there's 1,300 users on the platform. Here, we'll be able to see the other users in this group specifically and connect with each other. Different people have been uploading content into the group already, which is really awesome. Discussions, album manage. How do we see the other users in here? I forgot. For now. So the Tribes platform is where we're uploading resources. This is the purpose of this platform. To get to know each other a little better. You can send each other messages as you get to know each other. And here we get to explore. Oh, someone's waiting to get in. Boom. Lori Fry, you're in. Hey, Lori, you're back. Thank you for joining us again. All right, so this is the Hive. The Hive is our repository of data at the moment. Here you can find the 5 categories that we've discussed on this call so far. Ecology at heart, hardware, human systems, economy, and then software. Each section is outlined here, ecology and its subgroups. Each one of these subgroups has a space to hold conversation about this specific topic. If that is your jam, Dr. Brian, I know you are ecology focused. So in here are the main subcategories. Potentially we'll add more subcategories based on everyone's input from the call today. We have hardware, right? Eric, this is your jam. Eric, and all the beautiful things that you're building, everything from master plans to waste energy solutions, air solutions, and all of the above. We have humanware. This is the topic that you brought up, Kevin. Does this framework represent us as individuals? And us as individuals, I hope to be organized by this human where humans, what was the word that we're using? Human systems topics. Yeah. Everything from mental health to education to PR. How do we share our vision and our ideas to legal topics and governance, economy and technology. Each one of these groups has what you need for uploading and sharing conversations. Example, let's go to governance. So governance opens a group. In this group, you'll see that people are sharing resources, having conversations. We have some examples of consensus, some governance software. You can go here to the discussions, and there's a forum style repository where we can have conversations on different topics. Some that exist here are consensus strategies, governance software. You can start a new discussion or tune in to existing discussions and follow them and get notifications. The most exciting part here is the document section. In this document section, you can upload books, PDFs. We need some more governance stuff. If you guys have anything out there, feel free to either jump in here. You can upload a file and drop it in here and give a little description of it. Or if you're want a little more walkthrough of the platform, feel free to send it to us directly, and we'll walk you through the process of uploading it. Again, you can open documentation here. You can look at it, and then you can download it to your machine and explore these key pieces of documents that have helped other communities. We have different models for different projects around the world that we've met and have connected with online. These are frameworks and guides in themselves. I'm sharing one of them here, links, books, all kinds of stuff, toolkits, really powerful resources. Okay. So that was a tour of the Tribes platform. I, again, invite you guys, as that's going to be our main repository for uploading data. Retribe sign up and quickly getting into the master. I find it much easier to just register an account, then exit the web page, and then jump back into the link. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, thank you, Eric. Yeah, definitely. Like, you can just create an account, join the correct group, which Eric has shared here in the chat, which is the Masterminding Eden group. It'll be easier for us to find each other on these calls. Let me close this and let me go back here. Okay, it's 1:30 now, you guys. This is technically what we allotted for on the time. I'd love to leave a few moments of feedback. It's beautiful to see so many people logged in at the same time on the platform. Here's the group. Make sure you guys join the Masterminding Eden group. That's, let's say, our little clubhouse for these calls. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to come back to the call. And I'd love to leave a little moment now for feedback and any kind of sharing. If anyone would like to share anything, please raise your hand. Go ahead and start sharing.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Logan.
I get that this phase is like getting a ton of as many resources as possible, and
Sure.
that we're simplifying down. But that is the plan to simplify them down into some short guide or some like eventually, what is this? All of this commonality and framework going to end up as for someone that's trying to get into this that might not have the background that the people on the call do now?
Sure, I would say like the big picture is the framework, meaning, right, those components that we shared in those cards, like the purpose of a regenerative neighborhood, the process to developing it, the categories. This is like the big image. But then within each of those categories, ecology, hardware, human systems, our goal should be to create some kind of checklist for someone who says, I want to create a community that is a new society style of space, that they have the macro framework. And within that framework, the world is in fractals as we know it, nature. A fractal with a little fractals inside of ecology, hardware, humanware. So for every step of that journey, and even that will be broken down into smaller fractals of the subcategories.
Okay. And so they're basically picking that based on the community they're building. They're pulling for the person that's in charge is pulling from everything that's out there and then distilling that down into what it makes the most sense for their actual community and then building out.
Right. Camara really inspired me in saying, what we're creating is a framework and not necessarily a blueprint, because every place is different. Every group will be different. And like everyone shared really good descriptions of what a framework is a good way for us, you specifically, Logan, a good way for us to coordinate an example and the categories. This framework provides people the exoskeleton, the skeleton, and it's up to them based on all of the resources that we add. And by making them easily accessible and processable, to add the meat to the bones of their community, of their organism.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Good question. Thank you for asking, Logan. That's the big why and the what we're building.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else? Some afterthoughts, some feedback? I'd love to hear. Did you enjoy the call? Is there like a good flow of this going? Any
I think
shares?
the Miro board is good, and we're definitely going to need a way to structure the data collection and curate it. Large language models can help with that.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to be testing the Miro has like some AI function. At the easiest model, I'm going to be taking screenshots of each one of the sections where people shared things and uploading that content to an LLM and having it break it down in some nested list format that can be uploaded to the smart dynamic documentation set. That's going to be our first attempt at making sense of all of this wisdom that's coming from the collective. Again, if anyone wants to be part of that, we'll definitely be able to use some help with the heavy lifting. As we make that dynamic documentation, we'll be sharing the live version of that in a GitHub repository in like a markdown format, which is just easier to read and process for LLMs. And you'll be able to pull that, use it, add stuff, and even make any kind of a upload yourself. We'll probably host a specific workshop on how to use that system. If any of you want, feel free to DM me, message me, send me a WhatsApp message, or write me on the Tribes platform, ideally. Yeah, anyone else? Any feedback, things you liked, any suggestions?
Hey, Oscar, this is Jesse. I just wanted to say it's really nice to see how things are progressing with the Tribes platform. It made me think about a conversation you and Sonia and I were having back in Honduras a few years ago about like front of house and back of house, like sharing knowledge and resources between groups that might not otherwise want to be affiliated. Like not only are people doing different things, but they might not even like what each other are doing, and they can still benefit from the learnings, the cross pollination. So really, really cool to see integrated this way with everything else that's happening.
Quick suggestion, Oscar.
Yeah. Thanks for that feedback, Jesse.
Would you guys you be open, or does this make sense to all of you, that we would create a simple spreadsheet that you could yourself put in your contact information and a little description, a very simple one-pager spreadsheet, so that because I'm finding if I want to get a hold of somebody, the Regen Tribe environment isn't set up very well for that. So any thoughts?
The Tribes platform, are you struggling to like find others on there, Vic, or?
Yeah, for me, it's not about information. It's about relationships and connection first. And
definitely,
the Regen intended that, but it's not working because it's organized by information. It's not organized by trying to make connections with people. So a simple spreadsheet, it's just suggesting it.
It's so, yeah, it's definitely an option, Vic. I would love to understand. So your goal for that spreadsheet would be to see everyone and be able to get their contact info to send them a text or an email or something.
To do a quick search on a name because I see something on the Miro. Oh, there's Bob. Gee, I wonder, how do I get a hold of him? If I go to Regen, I still don't know which, what it is. So I could do a quick search on a spreadsheet and at least get his email and say, hey, I noticed your X, Y, or Z. It was that idea, at least until we get a little bit more sophisticated with connecting with each other.
So Vic, I'm sharing my screen real quick just to show you what this could look like. If you go to example, the Masterminding Eden group, which is, with our partnership with Cam and Masterminding Eden, this is the custom group we created for this endeavor of this framework. And in here, when you land on the group, you land on the feed page, just a little navigation. In the meantime, maybe while we do kick off a spreadsheet and a simple form, also totally an option. But here, there's a tab on the top for members. And once you click members, you can see everyone that is joining this group, which is everyone that has been on the call so far, even some members that aren't on this call, like Martin and Jonathan. Kamara's here. And so here you can click into them and see their profile. On their profile, they share ways to get in touch, right? Like I have my email on here. I'm also open to adding my phone number on here. This is currently what we're doing. And you can even just send them a direct message on here. If you want to get in touch in that way, you'll get an email notification. We're using this to kind of try to keep everything in one place.
Maybe this will work. Yeah.
If that works for now, I'm also open to creating a form that we can send in the group. I think everyone at this point is in the Masterminding Eden group, or is anyone not in that group on Telegram? Like, what group are we all in? that we can have some like common communication space. I think that's one of the most important things that we can agree on, maybe on this call. You know, like, are we all in the Masterminding Eden Telegram? I'm in that one. Maybe everyone, show of hands. Is everyone in that one? The Masterminding Eden Telegram group? I am. No? Okay. Maybe let's, not yet. Okay.
Do
Can you
we
send a
share
link?
the links to it in the chat?
Sure. I think the more groups we're all in, the better. So I'm going to share links in this chat real quick so that we're all kind of synced. Can you share the Masterminding Eden Telegram group? Are you in that one, Sonia? Okay. So Sonia's going to share in here first the Masterminding Eden Telegram group, which is the one Camara started in case you have a Telegram or maybe you don't. That's one channel where Cam is sending updates and helping with outreach every week. We're also sharing posts. Yeah, agree. Signal is secure and decentralized. I also have a Signal. Can you create groups in Signal?
Yes.
Dr. Brian?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Most definitely. We're doing one now. In fact, there are even calls on Signal.
Oh, interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Okay, so yeah.
So I would recommend that.
You cannot add people, but can people, is there a link that, no, oh, Cam has to add people. Okay, so Cam has to add people manually to that group, to the Masterminding Eden Telegram. Okay. All right. So, well,
there's a suggestion to create a
go
Signal group. It seems like, I mean, let's see if there are objections, but it seems to have a better metadata policy as well.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, Signal's for sure the most secure of all the groups. Definitely agreed. I also enjoy having like, right, this Tribes platform is like hosted on our own private server.
Yes.
And so that also makes me feel good in that sense, that like conversations are on that private server that aren't being shared with anyone.
Have you tried sending a message, Vic, to anyone in the Tribes platform?
From the Tribes platform? No.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I was like trying to look up your name, but I guess if I
you did.
search feed,
I got one from you.
Yeah, I sent you
I
a
tried to
friend
reply
request.
back to you, and I couldn't find how to get. I mean, maybe I'm just a dork, but
No, I'm right there with you. It takes some navigating.
It's not very user friendly.
Yeah, it's our first version. If anyone's a software developer, by the way, I'd love some like thought partnership. We're currently building a full stack version of this platform that'll be much more user friendly and like React based instead of a PHP old school solution. This has so far gotten some progress, but we'll get there. Okay, Sonia has also added our Regen Tribe Telegram. We share updates in there of the progress we're working on with the tools. We have a community in there as well that has been supporting us. Feel free to join that Telegram group. I know we're all in a million Telegram groups. Afo, you have a question? You want to share something?
I'll just put my hands up to the software. I do not have a lot of bandwidth, but if I could help maybe do a consultation and help you explore.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that would be a really good conversation. I'd love to have that maybe this week if you're up for it.
Cool.
Okay. So, thank you for bringing up that topic, Vic. It's critical that we can all communicate with each other and find each other when something definitely strikes us, that we can right away message that person. My hopes was that we could centralize on something safe, right? Signal, Telegram is kind of safe. Tribes platform for me is safe because it's our server. Also, it brings everyone into the same place where the resources are and already categorized. So that was kind of my push for that and the hope. Let's keep that thread going on what's the best way that we can do this. We are, agnostic of solutions. It's all for the end goal in mind of getting resources, being able to connect with each other. I'm looking forward to a day where we're all part of a physical location and potentially even living all together. You guys are the warriors of this movement. Everyone working on their own thing, passionate about the different puzzle pieces that it takes to create this beautiful image of a regenerative future and a new society. I'm grateful for all of you. Do you guys have anyone else with some comments? We're about 15 minutes over. I want to honor everyone's time. And if any of you have a hard stop, I honor that. any more feedback, any more questions or shares? I'd love to hear suggestions. Yeah.
Oscar, I just want to say, hey, I just want to thank you for the way you managed this call and stuff like that. I thought we got some good work done. I thought it was a good use of time. Hopefully everyone, well, most people agree. And yeah, we're going to work out the kinks in terms of communication. But right now I'm in the Tribes platform. It's new, it's functional, it's only going to get better. AFO's already ready to step in with help, with some design help. So we're going to get there, So I just wanted to thank you because I know this is hard work. This is herding the cats, and we're all over the world. But that's the family, So thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Also, here a question to honor Dr. Brian's request. How does everyone feel about moving the call like 3 hours later, at least for the next 2 weeks, so Dr. Brian can join and it's not so early for him, 3 a.m. time? You're a warrior. Thank you for being here, Dr. Brian. It'll be ecology. So next week the calls instead of noon EST would be 3 p.m. EST.
Do it
for us here. If everybody's cool with that, let's check in on that. Awesome. So yeah, Dr. Brian will be shifting the ecology calls to 3 p.m. So you can do a 6 a.m. wake up instead of a middle of the night. Thank you so much for being here. Super appreciate it. I'm excited to get to know you more.
Yeah, great session today.
Okay, cool. Thank you guys. Thank you. Yeah, I started this to meet others and create something new, and it's growing momentum more and more, and especially with the external forces that the world is currently imposing on us, right? Pressure builds diamonds, and we're here for it, you guys. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate it. I'm going to stay on the call for a little bit, sorting some stuff. If you want to stay and chat, I'm here for it. I'm going to start looking through the board and getting a few things organized in there. If anyone else has any more feedback, I'm here for it. I would love to hear suggestions. I'm going to talk a little more about the dynamic documentation set that we're going to be using as of now, as a thought, kind of what, if you've used Notebook LLM, what that looks like. We're using a program called Obsidian. But yeah, thank you guys for joining the call. Deeply appreciate all of you. The only way we see the monoliths that are guiding society in not the most beautiful direction, and instead of fighting those beasts, we decide to build new. And this is what we're here for, using that energy for something beautiful. Thank you guys for, you all inspire us every day. These tools and things that we're building are for you guys and for us. And yeah, thank you for the contributions. All the content on the board right now is super exciting to process and make the most use of. Yeah, thank you for putting gold on the board.
Thanks, Oscar. Thanks for hosting.
Yeah. Appreciate you guys all. Okay, so yeah, if anyone has any questions, I'd love to gauge those. I'm gonna share one more thing here. Where is it? Here, Obsidian. So I'm gonna share my screen for a second. Okay, so I'm gonna share my entire screen. So currently in that smart dynamic documentation set that we're discussing, the program we're using is called Obsidian. Obsidian is basically a markdown editor. So the files live locally on your machine. We'll do a workshop on how to pull the data from a GitHub repository that we'll be using as kind of the digital or rather cloud-based brain of the content we're gathering. Again, everything we're doing is open source, crowdsourced, from the community, available to anyone to use and contribute to. This is just basically, it's a visual of folders that live on your local machine. We're already starting the structure of it, a welcome page, an outline of the different pages, the basic 101 of what the framework is, and then categories for each one of the categories. In here, for example, this actually will be a folder that we will call one ecology. And in this folder, we'll add the right document. So this is going to look something like this. We'll also create another folder for welcome folder, which is like where this and this and this will go. And you can say this is 0. So this is basically a folder structure that holds the data. And this folder structure is very easy to query with an LLM. I'll show you guys my personal one where we hold kind of the data for what Regen Tribe is. It's broken down into these folders, key terms. And so there's a very cool tool that allows us to select multiple folders and multiple documents. Boom. And I can highlight multiple documents. Example here, I can highlight all of these documents. I can right click and say chat with this selection. This is a plugin a friend of mine made. And here on the right, it's now brought in these 3 folders, and I can use this LLM to query. So I can ask it like, what is Regen Tribe's main goal? And this will pull from all of the data. I can select down here which LLM I want to use. And it describes our main goal as described by our big why. For humanity, it's to ensure that humans have their core and higher needs met. And for the planet, it's using circular systems for resource creation and increasing the biological capacity of their local areas, achieving a net positive effect in the long run. So it took these 3 documents and pulled out the summary of them. This is kind of my back end where we're testing and doing that. I'm also excited to create, I'll share with you here, the update to our current website, which is regentribe.co. We're currently doing a bit of a rebranding. And here, we've now created an LLM bot that you can plug in here that uses that same technology I showed you there. We've created Gina, our first AI member of the collective, and she is using our database of resources to answer questions. So I can ask Gina, what are some of the active projects Regen Tribe is working on? And she'll query our database and pull in as an LLM what we are currently working on and spit it back out on this chatbot.
Hey, Oscar,
our goal is to create.
Nice. Did you guys add the LLM to Obsidian?
Yes.
Sweet,
we have the APIs.
Now it makes it a real tool. This is very cool. Nice work.
Yeah. We have an API that we use ChatGPT, backend the OpenAI stuff. We can also use an open source one or different LLMs. And so this is what we're going to use for this smart documentation, where people will be able to go through all of the resources as a wiki. But if they don't want to, go through folders and folders and folders, they'll be able to ask questions here.
I mean, this actually, AI eliminates the need for organizational structure in the end. It's important, but mostly I want to go in. I think of the word ecology very differently, so that category doesn't work for me. But
sure,
if I can do these searches that are synaptic LLM,
now
I can, then I can find what I need. One point is when it responds to and gives you these what's in it, it should connect with the person who wrote it. Again, connecting people. Is there a way to do that?
Vic, that's a super good point, right? We definitely have to be, we got to find a way where when people share something, we can tag them. I wish that Miro did that automatically. Potentially, we're going to do call to action where as an individual shares a content, maybe they add their tag, their name.
Well, even in Obsidian, though, there's a way you found it. You can tag with Joe, who wrote this piece on ecology that came up in the LLM, right?
Right.
Then I can reach out to that person and find out more, right? It's, again, the connection thing. I'm kind of big.
Yeah, I agree. Right now, like one of the positive things about the Tribes platform is if you upload a resource, I can track in the metadata who uploaded it. So then I could write a little script that when data is referenced by the LLM, the script can also pull the user, and you can get that user's info on Tribe's platform and whatever. It's the best option I have right now because it's a platform I have access to the metadata on.
Yeah, start simple, experiment. That's great.
Right. So that's kind of the direction we're going in. So that's a little look, kind of a little peek behind the curtain of how we're planning on taking all of this magic, uploading it to in the first phase, this documentation space, which is this Obsidian tool that is just a markdown editor. And then being able to query all of that data, putting it onto a public server or like our online server, and people will be able to use that bot to ask it questions. So that's kind of a little peek at where we're going with this. Again, if anyone is interested and would like to learn this, we'll be hosting some workshops on this exact journey to recruit and train some operatives to support with this journey. But yeah, that I wanted to share that with you guys, give you a little peek on that and what's going on. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Yeah, I'm excited to share that as well. I've recorded this call and we'll be posting all of this on our YouTube channel. Sonia, can you post our YouTube link on the chat? I'll share that in the group chat. I'll share that on the Tribes platform, on our Telegram and the Masterminding Eden one. Yeah, Dr. Brian, tell Cam to add you to the Telegram group if you're up for that. And okay. I'm inspired by you and the Signal initiative to create a Signal group. Yeah, you know, as like, you know, I have this interesting thought that at some point, as we scale and really create alternatives to the mainstream system that none of us really are enjoying, that potentially organizations will come after us, you know? So sure, data security is critical and definitely on the mind. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Hope for the
also,
best and plan for the worst.
Yeah, I like the Obsidian development, and I just came across an interesting YouTube and added a Perplexity that did a brief analysis of Obsidian versus this pipeline, the second brain pipeline that Nate Jones describes, which may have some collaborative benefits. So depending on what your goal is, if it's to produce a document, then it might be Obsidian. If your goal is to produce a second brain, then it's interesting to look at the tool mashup that he's put together.
What is the tool that could you share that with me? Here, I'm going to share my number here.
The Perplexity link in the chat outlines it and provides a link to the YouTube. The YouTube describes a second brain pipeline and he's put together that integrates Slack, Notion, Zapier, and LLM. And the result is a very interesting automated approach to taking input, storing it, and organizing it, getting actions from that input. It's a way to really manage a project at some level.
They're moving more toward agency then, it sounds like that. Yeah.
It is more towards agency.
I would agree.
But I'm just beginning to explore that one. We're also using Monday.com. But it's interesting to consider these various data points and what they'll come in strongest at. So happy to brainstorm that one further.
Oh, cool. Great. So I've just shared that link that you shared with me in the Masterminding Eden group on the Tribes platform, so it doesn't disappear with the end of this call on the Zoom. Cool.
Hey,
so
Oscar, another one to check out is Abacus.ai. Abacus.ai. It's a meta chat, and they're experimenting with bringing them all together under one umbrella. So it's a meta orientation. I like it. It's still, new, but go check it out.
I'm using it quite extensively, and it's got a Teams feature and a projects feature, and I'm using Abacus all the time now as my main interface.
I've been messing with the agent one. Really? It does actually organize in a way. In the end, it still struggles with a final output, a final outcome, like most AI. But
but it does have memories, and so that's coming. I'm not sure if it's as good as GPT yet.
Okay, awesome.
No, probably not. That's the big one with AI, is memory. It forgets and forgets and forgets.
Well, no, but I mean, GPT actually stores memories, especially when you ask it to. and Abacus is beginning to do that.
You're right.
Cool.
Okay, Lori, I got your message that you're interested in learning and helping. I've shared my number in there, or go ahead and write me on the Tribes platform so we can keep everything connected. Okay, cool, you guys. Yeah, good tools. I'm going to check those out. Yeah, again, we're open. I've been using Obsidian because it's like simple interface, and the way I'm going to link it all is the Obsidian. I'm going to make a GitHub repository where every time I upload documentation, I'll push it to GitHub, and then everyone will have access to that GitHub where, you know, in the best sense, they could bring that GitHub repository to their computer, add anything, and then push to the cloud. And we'll be able, whoever is trained on it will have access to read it, review it, and either accept it or decline it. And that's how that collective ring can work. That requires an extra step of knowing how to use GitHub and doing that whole thing. I imagine there's going to be tools that make it much easier. Like Notebook LLM is one of those, right? The Google offering. But do we want to be on Google? You know?
Yeah. I think there's a huge benefit to decentralizing. GitHub is attractive, although it's owned by Microsoft.
Also, yeah, right. They bought all the good ones.
Well, but there's a spin out from GitHub, right? That is not centrally owned. So we can check that one out. It's very similar.
You know, I think there's like so many tools now. It's becoming like a decision fatigue thing where you like invest a little bit of time into one tool, and then retooling is a whole like, you know, hat change. And so finding that sweet balance, this is, you know, getting suggestions from you guys. Both of you said Abacus and you're using it deeply, you said. I'm definitely going to check that one out over the weekend and this week and see how we can integrate. We're at the, you know, initial steps of that smart dynamic documentation. From these first calls, we have now enough data to start testing and using that on. And so we'll be definitely exploring before we get too committed to one tool. So really
that sounds great. Yeah, happy to contribute to that. I think there's a decentralized form of GitHub, and the reason it feels important is most of the issues of the poly crisis seem to be addressed to over-centralization. So it could be that you know, having a foundation that's decentralized, including Signal, could have merits.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. I appreciate your like focus on that, which I deeply agree.
Yeah, it's only kind of reached awareness in recent years, but decentralization of control and information power. And
right. I think, you know, before there was so much data, it was like unlikely that someone was going to find you unless you like made it to such a, you know, well-known level. But now with all the processing power that there is, everyone knows everything. Like it's so easy to query and to show up as a red dot on someone's map of like, hey, there's some disruptors over there that are building some traction, even from just 3 or 4 calls. That will show up as a red light in someone's map that can, you know, project if it continues to go at the scale that we're working at, what it could do to them, you know.
An example is the Ice Tracker app, which I think we're helping people avoid Ice Agent.
Right.
Kind of real-time group.
Unsettling and not cool.
Right.
So yeah.
Huge.
Cool. Yeah. What a pleasure to connect, Dr. Brian. Yeah. So I'll be shifting the calls to 3. I'm going to redo the messaging to make sure Camara and I are aligned on that, and everyone gets the 3 p.m. call time.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Oscar.
Yeah. Appreciate your time, Dr. Brian.
My
Vic,
pleasure.
thank you for all the feedback, brother. Feel free to message me. Let's build this connection, you and I. I see you're very interested in the human aspect. Same. I'd love to walk you through some tools and everything to get you up to speed, Vic. You're sharing great perspectives and deeply appreciate them.
Super.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, what should we focus on bringing for the ecology meeting? Just a heads up, homework-wise.
Okay, homework-wise, ecology meeting. Let's see. Let me go to the board real quick. So in the ecology section, we have these you know, I think for me, a big portion of ecology, or Dr. Brian, you know, I would love to hear your perspective as well.
Welcome, guys, to this Miro journey.
I guess for me is understanding, step one of permaculture is understanding the space. Mm-hmm. So maybe tools on how to evaluate existing ecology, the existing ecosystem is important. You shared some stuff on a previous call. Eric, permaculture.
I got today confused with ecology. I was like, oh, it's a framework session, but
sure, you shared some good ones on that call with us previously. I remember.
Yeah, I was just thinking like podcasters and popular YouTubes that I follow that's in the permaculture field. So gathering that up.
There was a huge one that we did last year with the Permaculture Education Institute, Maura Gamble of Crystal Waters, and it was there were probably 100 YouTubes that came out of that. I'm hoping she's reposted them by now. But that's one good resource. Another is the work that we've done with Dave Holmgren. I did an academic paper with him last year on applying the dozen permaculture design principles to the marine environment. I think his books are really good. There's Retro Suburbia is actually a very interesting permaculture centered view on what can we do in our communities to build sustainable living. And I like Dave because he's such a deep thinker on permaculture as one of the founding fathers of permaculture. I think he's been an incredible resource, and he has a community down in Victoria called Meliadoria, I believe. So he has 2 or 3 books. Retro Suburbia is one of them, and there's 2 or 3 others. Happy to kind of post those. We've done some work on marine permaculture on the Climate Foundation website. We're building to economic sustainability this year. And I think I'd start with the dozen permaculture design principles. I think it works great on land. It works great in the sea. And we're even working on social permaculture, which is really focusing on how do we apply the dozen permaculture design principles to building sustainable social environments.
Yeah. Human permaculture, for sure. Social permaculture is like my favorite blend of, as a systems engineer and as being obsessed with society. The third part of that trifecta for me was getting my hands on the soil and learning how to grow food the way nature does it, and realizing that correspondence as above, so below, the way nature happens with food and plants, it happens with humans. Any documentation like that, I'd love to see that, Dr. Brian. Let's get some links for all of that. Share it on the Miro board, or if you guys want, you go ahead and start dropping stuff into the ecology section of the Tribes platform. In the permaculture section, we have a bunch of good resources. Start a conversation in there, drop a resource in the document section. That'd be great. Our heavy lift is going to be to pull resource by resource and start turning all of that into documents that'll live in that markdown structure, or whatever we choose as a software for that interface, as giant documentation sets, and that becoming our kind of training that we'll be giving this LLM.
That's great. I've dropped a link to our marine permaculture recent media, which is an example of, let's say, how we might apply dozen permaculture design principles.
Cool.
I would encourage in that recent media, there is the 2024 or 2025 paper on applying permaculture design principles to the marine environment. I think that'd be a great template to thinking about ecology in general, because it gets people familiar with the dozen permaculture design principles, and then there are a number of online references that'll dive into that deeper.
Yeah. I agree. Well, a big goal for us, I think, now is to not try to reinvent the wheel. There's tons of awesome stuff out there. And
exactly,
our biggest effort right now is to just get all of that already powerful tools and make it as easily processable as possible. So, I think your answer to your question, Eric, is any guides, documents, resources that you know of, even just websites. Maybe they don't have a PDF that you can pull but a website that shares any vision like this or links to books. At the very best, we find a PDF version of the book that we can import. At the worst case, we just get a summary on, some LLM of recommended books and upload that as a reference into the digital brain that can be to when we have questions.
Should I put up my Goodreads reading list?
Yeah, that'd be great.
That might be that I kind of want to go through and actually like organize it into like hardware or ecology or human systems, because that would be a efficient breakdown method of that reading list. That'd be useful.
Yeah, definitely. So right now my work is I'm kind of, I'm trying to figure out the most streamlined way. So in the best case, everyone knows exactly what group to go to and drops things in the corresponding subgroups and in the document section. One simpler step than that is everything gets dropped into the Masterminding eating group. Like I'm doing right now. I'm sharing links or application. I'm dropping the things that you guys are sharing now in that Zoom chat into the Masterminding Eden group just as a link on the wall. From there, the homework for me and the team will be to take these links and put them in the corresponding subgroups. One step even easier than that to make sure we get at least the data is people doing it on the Miro board, which then requires the extra 2 steps of putting it on the platform and then into the right subgroup. So I feel as more people get comfortable with the platform, they'll be able to navigate to the corresponding areas and do some of that heavy lifting of putting it in the right containers already. But I'm just eager to get all of the content, and I'm willing to take on the extra lifting process of putting it in groups and then processing.
I would suggest that we develop an automation pipeline, because the AI tools are going to be very good at structuring the data. Sure. These calls are a great way of collecting data collection. And I think if we develop a nice pipeline that's repeatable, and I have the greatest confidence right now in Claude because it's doing well in coding. So the errors of omission are kind of severe for the other LLMs. Sure. But Claude, if constrained properly, I think could repeatedly structure and organize our growing data set of information.
Well, I want to jump on that, Brian, because, support that. And again, it's this LLM thing that makes us think differently. We don't have to structure anymore. And we don't want to structure, because we'll end up building the old system if we do that. Because that's all old behavior in our head. Let the LLM respond to how we talk to each other, how we send up, just have one big dump input where I can put my stuff and Brian's, everybody puts their stuff. The LLM then does cross correlation, and we spend our time designing the algorithms to generate powerful correlation. Then what will emerge are the structures. It will come out of that rather than start with that.
It's true. Yeah. That's very true, Vic. So one of the thoughts we had was to create a simple web app, right? I've been using Claude Code to build some things, to create a simple web app where everyone has a simple portal where they just upload a document, maybe add a little description to it, potentially a drop down with the categories that they can auto say, oh, this is ecology and this subcategory and this other thing. And, whether they only upload a PDF or a link, or they upload it with a description and a category picked, it's just one portal. They don't have to navigate.
Not even a portal. Think about it semantically. So the algorithm's going to use semantic power to correlate ecology with nature, with interdependency, with the language that's multi-diversified, which is what we need to do, because we actually need to generate a new language set if we want to build a new future. And the LLMs are the tool to allow us to do that. So I'm just reinforcing, we don't need to categorize anymore. That's the result will be the categories, not the starting point.
I agree, Vic. Yeah, I agree. I think it's still just like I think my experience with LLMs so far is the more structured I feed it the data, the better results I've been getting. So I think that's my desire to want to add some kind of
right, but that's because the algorithms are designed that way.
Right.
This is an algorithm issue.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
even the next generation that are building these algorithms are coming from the old paradigm of how to structure information.
Mm-hmm.
So if we start rethinking about how do we create relationships, it changes the whole design methodology. Instead of how do we structure the information, then you see what I'm saying? Or I don't.
Yeah, no,
I've been having trouble expressing it. So thanks for letting me try to.
I definitely see like how you're describing it. Yeah, right. The best case would be we just have like one big dump where it's like it's listening to the call and there's just a dump of things. And we say, hey, organize this with this goal in mind. We're creating a framework, build it for us. Best case scenario.
And even we tell it that as a secondary, because we have a community that's like this and you're like that. It's different. So I'm going to tell it to organize differently than you are.
Right.
So a reframe on our own thinking of how we use the tools that we've created. Yeah.
Yeah. Deeply agree with that. I think like we could probably have a whole call series on structuring and building that LLM tool, which I think will be either the next call, like maybe we'll do another call every other week or every week for just LLM things. And that could be really fun, a more focused group of participants that are sharing tools and working, like maybe more like work sessions where we're each testing something different and seeing what the results are and giving that feedback to each other. That could be really cool if you guys are up for that. I'd be super up for that.
I'd be count me in on that for sure.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Nice.
Yeah, happy to participate. Jerry's brain has been around for a couple decades, and it's, he's got 1 million nodes, and it's all a network. It's really a mind map.
Yeah.
But I think increasingly building those structures as a bot off of an LLM could be a really effective way. What I like about it is as we bring new people into Masterminding Eden, they can just start chatting with the bot and learn everything they need to or want to know because the bot's got an encyclopedic database on just everything that is Masterminding Eden. And that's nice. It's a nice customizable thing that provides people with information that they want when they want it.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
To me, this which it creates is the power, the potential for genesis, not regenerative, which is a remake or a recreation. What we need to do is create something totally new.
Well, I will say the wheel of reincarnation. I think at some level I'm inspired by the 98% of human history that was decentralized, that was nomadic. And so I would claim that's 294,000 of the 300,000 years that humanity's been around. And it's only the last 6,000 years that we've had nation states and city states and centralization.
Yeah.
And so our DNA is keyed towards decentralized cooperation. And I feel like we're coming back to our roots.
It seems to be coming around.
Yeah.
I hope we
fingers crossed.
Yeah. The whole retro being trendy again style, like analog devices, pixelated graphics, like the retro thing is coming, and why not for society?
It is.
Yeah.
Are you guys familiar with Holo, which is the hardware decentralized system?
Oh,
no.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
They're struggling, but they have the right idea. And ultimately, I would love to see the Eden collaboration use a Holo platform for all of our decentralized data and get off of the central servers.
So
that's the future.
That's interesting. Yeah, we're looking at servers in the ocean, and actually by the hectare, you can get about 1 megawatt per hectare. We've already pioneered marine solar. They'll give you 1 megawatt per hectare, and we've built this ring behind me is like a quarter hectare.
As long as they can handle the upcoming weather, that's interesting.
Yeah, actually, we've survived Category 5 hurricanes, 2 of them. The last one just a month ago. And the best way to outrun a hurricane is to go down. So we've connected up with the seasteading folks, and literally we dropped this platform 5 meters, and we withstood a Category 5 hurricane, and most of the seaweed was still on it. So some good lessons there, and the idea of decentralized data centers, it works in inner space and the ocean and outer space as well. So kind of an interesting development.
I want to ask you guys, because I think you might have some input on this. What do you think of Linux, and what do you think of trying to find ways to make like programming like Linux and GitHub and things of that nature and SaaS more like applicable to the general population? How do we access onto these systems? How do we use these Web3 services? We have these advanced technologies, but we don't seem to have like the language to access into them and make it gamify the process or allow someone to enter in and participate. That's very general statements, but I'm interested in the concept of what is the method of access into these Web3 or 4 services that are going to be used with these large language processing models, and if we're concerned about digital sovereignty, like I don't see everybody getting an above phone or their own VPN or their own hosting their own server, but I mean, what kind of interesting things are in that direction is what I'm curious about.
Well, I think people are going to be able to program in English increasingly, especially with Claude moving the state of the art forward so quickly. Open sourcing is going to be key, and we've got a number of examples of that from Linux, which fundamentally is open source, even though that it's been co-opted a number of times. I think there's an opportunity to create a protected open source ecosystem. We'd like to have something where uh, stellar communities, or let's just say regenerative communities around the world, can easily license the key tech or know-how that's needed to make that work, but that large corporates, multinationals, nation states have to pay for that license. So there would be a distinction there. And that protected open source ecosystem is intended to enable a lot of collaboration and yet not co-opting, because at some level you could say, well, Google and Sun and IBM all benefited from just sucking on to Linux and using it. So there's some interesting trade-offs there. Go ahead.
So it's like the infrastructure that nation states have to support compared to like grassroots organizations is, if not, the decentralized nature might be more advantageous on the market.
Yeah, I mean, decentralization is
absolutely.
key. Here's a very small example, and that is I spent a month test driving a Tesla full self-driving, which was okay, but the autocracy was oppressive. I've got to tell you. I mean, t getting locked out of full self-driving for 10 days, I was just crazy. So we're actually big champions of Open Pilot, right? Open Pilot's this group out of San Diego, and that's Comma AI, and it's got 80% of the functionality of full self-driving, works on 300 cars, but it costs $1,000 instead of 8,000 or 10,000. It's a rear view mirror for your car, and it's open source GitHub, right? So it's really they've done 100 million miles so far. So we're really like putting a lot of energy behind these open source movements, and I think the key to regenerative communities around the world is going to be decentralized tech that's going to provide abundant energy, food, and labor
Yeah,
for
This
communities
should
all
be a
over.
principle of what we're about, is this decentralization, information sharing, and communication. And yeah,
Agreed.
there's amazing open source tools, thousands of them, right? They're not API'd very well. There's not good interconnection between them. So, but guess what? A micro community network would be the reason to do that. But somebody would have to initiate it. It could be us.
like what's the chances of me going to like an electronic junkyard to compile my own grassroots like infrastructure with IoT on my Web3? You know, it's like, can I go get a bunch of Y links and hook them together and make a little network there? Could it be that accessible? Or, you know,
You got to be a
because I
pretty
could
good
see something
tech
like
to
that in
do it.
Ghana happening, to be honest. Like,
I would say embrace what's out there and then build upon it. I think we've got a
Yeah,
great chance to, build on open source tools, and we're standing on the shoulders of giants, but we can also add to that. And I think a lot of it is about decentralized open source tech.
decentralized. The primary focus would be the connectivity between them, which is poor. So, that could be our focus. We got,
Okay.
people like Oscar, and a lot of you are senior tech oriented people. So it could be a major movement for the Eden project.
Yeah, like what's the minimal viable infrastructure I would need to like support that Web3 network in a global sense, like that, like scaling in the opposite direction?
I think you need to start with the goals in mind. In other words, what do you want your Web3 network to do, and then work backwards.
Yeah.
Like I want to just track the logistics between the different nodes, regenerative nodes, and see just basically what that infrastructure would be. So that's what I was thinking, like getting a bunch of Y-links routers that were all thrown away and hooking them up and creating just the basic requirement, finding some solar panels that were ditched or something, and try to do it
Okay.
like
When you
minimum
say nodes, you're
economy.
probably referring to computing elements, although I thought you might have been referring to communities, but maybe there'll be a correspondence between those.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It was just like, where's the happy landfill? Uh, easy, just open access, the original way.
It's a good question. I
Go
think
to
there's
that one
been.
with Bitcoin in it. Maybe you'll find it. That lost
I
Bitcoin.
found the magic computer.
Oh
Oh,
yeah. That's great. Well, it's an interesting R&D topic. Certainly, I'm a big fan. We've got so many second life solar panels here on our acre. It's huge, and agrivoltaics is awesome because we're growing. We've got a farm bot that we're running right now, 3 by 6 meters, which does automation. It's a FarmBot XL, but we've seen examples where FarmBot Max went to 3 by 18 meters, and we've got a plan that'll get us 3 by 100 meters, which gets you a strip of a whole hectare. And the intention is to enable the automation and the gantry, but also to put the vertical bifacial panels that go left and right, and then actually enable collection of sunlight on a cloudy day, on an early sun or late in the afternoon, and it complements and reduces the need for energy storage. So you're really getting vegetables and PV on the same acres.
Right.
or like wind resistant, something to secure, because it's okay. It can be, you can meet structural challenges either if you have them on not copper, if you have steel lines or you have them on steel posts and pegs. But then wind differentials, like I was thinking, is there a way you can slope it in a certain way or add some kind of like structural aesthetic that actually has a windbreak function so that you could have them in more inhospitable environments where really then you're only concerned about is like debris flying and crushing material. If that could be your last resort, is that's a better
Yeah, we've done a lot of
viability.
studying on that on land and in the sea, and actually, some of these
Easiest,
marine solar panels are now hurricane
most
resilient.
effective. Yeah, most effective probably.
Right, right. We're aiming to protect those on we did actually have a Category 2 hurricane just in November, and our little surface platform as well as our submersible platform survived well. So we're getting improved resilience.
Are you working with the Seasteading Institute?
Yeah, I had some
Okay.
calls with them already,
Cool.
and I believe that marine permaculture is the reason for seasteading to exist. In other words, you start with the mariculture, and then you get the communities that support the mariculture.
They got some seasteaders that are now have been approved, I think, off the shores of Prospera, which is Roatan Island. You might want to check them out.
Okay.
Good speaking of relationships.
Do you know about Nature Jab?
Not sure.
Nature Jab, he's a young fellow in Georgia that's working on I always mess the word up. Not pyrolysis.
Pyrolysis.
Yeah, to liquefy plastics and turn them into fuels. And
Right.
he's been just working grassroots from ground up. And I was thinking like, oh, well, the big 10-mile plastic island, that's not going to be an issue anymore. That's just, now we need more plastic in the oceans. Not that but
I'm glad there are a lot of people working on plastic. That's a good thing to reduce. We're really worried about more fish, the need for more
yeah,
fish.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's an existential threat to
What,
Panama, where the upwelling just failed.
what with the AMOC, um, like that, I've read some of my colleagues were mentioning about the AMOC, that Atlantic undercurrent collapsing. So they say, oh, maybe pole shift or it's human.
Yeah, it's real.
It's
Oh, it's real. It's accelerating, and it's going to stratify the ocean. And this is how the Permian mass extinction happens.
Yeah, the temperature in my locale of being, I mean, we're entering into the deeper winter season, and it's like I should be expecting 20 and 15 degree Fahrenheit levels, and we're 44 up to 55, so
this is to Kamara's point. I think that anything we design, and we got a bunch of designers here, clearly we've got to be looking at beyond what regenerative means. I mean, this stuff has to truly sustain in the deeper meaning of sustainability for a long time, and for some really nasty shit that's coming down. The sun has got a tummy ache, and it is not getting better. And it's one of the reasons that all of these pole shifts are happening, in my opinion. And we've got to be ready for that. We're at a 12,000 year cycle, and every time it's wiped us out based on the history that we have. I'd kind of like that not to happen this time, but we're awful
or at
close
least
now.
good areas, good higher grounds to move to.
There are people studying that that weather guy. Who's that Cosmos weather guy? He's on YouTube. He's been researching the optimal places, and he's actually trying to start a community off the edge of the Rockies here in the States. I don't know if I want to be around for that. Do you guys?
Yeah. I'd probably have a higher probability.
That's a good question. There's one, you're reminding me, Vic, that there's a very important book that's really changed my life last year, and that is Stellar by James Arbib and Tony Seba. This, to me, provides a vision for moving beyond regeneration. The key thing about stellar tech on energy, food, and labor is that once we build it, we don't need any more inputs in order to generate outputs, food, energy, and labor for decades. And that enables a sustainable reusability and all the rest, whether it's solar and batteries, food tech.
That's sustainability.
Exactly.
The stuff we've been doing is corporate bullshit, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But
that's and so I would encourage everyone here to read Stellar. I've read it half a dozen times in the last 6 months, and it's formed really the basis. And what we're working on at the Climate Foundation are the stepping stones to get from where we are today to stellar communities. We're building a prototype stellar community right here in Australia. And the intention is to provide regenerative communities around the world with stellar tech when it comes to decimating costs of energy and batteries, of local food development, and of abundant labor and robotics.
Awesome, Brian. I'll be right over.
Yeah, where in Australia are you, Dr. Brian?
Queensland, just we're at the hinterlands of the Sunshine Coast of Queensland, about an hour north of Brisbane, and there's no less than half a dozen regenerative communities. This is a second center, if you will, of permaculture. So yeah, we like to say from Noosa to Narara. Belbunya is up in the Noosa area, which is 2 hours north of Brisbane. Narara is about an hour north of Sydney. There's 1,000 kilometers of regenerative communities up and down the coast. And it's a great climate. We've got four-season growing. We've got good rainfall. It's not too hot. The rest of Australia is baking, but we're fingers crossed. But a lot of it is about climate repair, and we've got these marine clouds keeping us cool in the summer. So I recommend checking out Stellar. We actually got a landing page for Stellar Startup Studio, and it's about moving beyond extraction. For the first time in 6,000 years, we've got all the tech that's needed to move beyond extraction in just 1 or 2 decades.
Jeez, how come I haven't heard about you guys? That's great. That's finally speaking some language that I'm comfortable with.
Well, good. I think it's all about
check
making
you out
these.
a little more, Brian.
My pleasure. Well, we've got a landing page for Stellar Startup Studio, and that's where we hope to develop the tech that's going to enable this open source DNA for stellar communities around the world.
Man, both of my computers died.
I saw that.
No
You
worries.
put me on the owner or whatever. Anyway,
Yeah.
I thought twice. Let's not let this guy in, but
Yeah, I'm loving this conversation right now. This is so good. Also, I had a question. Dr. Brian, can you share, like, where can we read more about the things that you're specifically working on? Like,
Sure.
I definitely want to know more about the community and also the marine permaculture project and the solar array you're working on. Like, epic stuff all across epic.
Oh, thank you. Well, climatefoundation.org is our main page for marine permaculture. We're dedicating all the resources we can from the Climate Foundation to developing stellar solutions, and that includes marine stellar is really marine permaculture, and that's precision mariculture. And I think there are three legs to the food security, and that is precision agrivoltaics, precision fermentation, and precision mariculture.
Yeah.
And so we'll do that on land and sea. On the labor side, we've got some good robotic developments. Certainly the self-driving cars is part of it, but we're leaning towards those open source solutions. So we're going to see how far we can get with Open Pilot and some of the leading. There's 300 cars that car models and makes that work with Open Pilot now, and we can embrace and extend that open source movement as an early example of robotics that can really free up transportation, time, and labor for people. And then finally, I think abundant energy. And really, I think we're going to address the climate crisis and other crises through decentralized abundant energy. With abundance, we can address, have the wealth, if you will, of food, energy, and labor to solve so many problems, including climate. And I think with a decentralized focus, we can actually enable people to do a rural restart. And for us, a rural restart means, a lot of folks are getting priced out of their mortgages because there's only variable rate mortgages here in Australia. And as people drop out of the urban rat race, they could do a rural restart with communities like ours.
Yeah, there's going to be more and more communities asking the question. So if somebody thinks this isn't a market that we're creating, it's a whole second economy, in my opinion, once we get going. But it's going to be done very differently, right? Right, gang? Very differently, not the extractive model.
Right, ideally, yeah.
It's going to be really important.
And so just to give you a little preview, we just did a landing page. Oh, I can send a request. That link I put on Stellar Startup, it's empowering change through collaboration. And this is a great example of it here. And so really, this is about how do we build the tech together that's going to enable regenerative communities around the world. We'd like to see 1,000 points of light being generated around the world that's going to enable decentralized communities to thrive and enable people to have abundant lives with healthy families. And I think that's the challenge of this generation.
It is. It is.
Really cool.
I'm writing a book on a network of micro communities globally. So basically, that's what you just described. They're innovation-based communities. In other words, but it doesn't that just mean a bunch of techie people. Innovation is a big term, but I think that it's really necessary to have the foresight of not just a place where a bunch of us get together and build. It's important to prototype. I totally agree with that, but it's got to be a prototype for a network, a Masilic-like micro community global network that enables all of these groups that are trying to figure out how to get started or what to do. So it's exciting to work with a bunch of you, and from what I've heard so far.
Well, likewise. And I think the opportunity is really to learn from the network state movement. And I'm impressed with the work of Audrey Tang and modern polity and pluralism, which I'd love to get into our bibliography as well on their GitHub. Because that provides a great example of how we organize at a nation state level. And network states work fine. I think there's going to be a huge precedent.
Yeah, they're the closest to that pluralism, I think. We do get confused with concentricism, which still has a single center, and polycentricism, which means multiple centers. And I think that's where we need to go, where the empowerment goes to each center, not one authority, and back to the hierarchy.
It's funny you mentioned 1,000 points of light. Have you heard of 1,000 plateaus?
I have not.
It is a specific. I think it's if I remember correctly, it was a critique on post-structuralist philosophy and relationships with people. But I'll be able to find it. I'll look it up and see if I can get the direct book reference.
Yeah, I found something on Wikipedia.
Yeah, I may just put up my Goodreads list on the Tribes platform and see if
Do it
anybody.
for sure.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
that'd
yeah.
be great.
Cool.
And I
Mm-hmm.
sent you a message as well, Vic. If you go to your inbox option, you can like search in the search bar
On
if you
Tribes.
want to.
By the way, is there a way to get that Tribes to just automatically send an email? Because I don't go and check like
Yeah, yeah. It should be when you receive messages, it should send you an email.
should. Okay,
It could be going into your spam.
I'll double check.
It happens a lot. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Dr. Brian, I just saw you said we should start a regenerative network state. Like, absolutely. Actually, our team went to Balaji's startup city in Malaysia at the end of last year. We were there helping with a bit of like the community creation process. We hosted a few workshops, helping
Cool.
people ideate the start of their network state concept. And we presented to him the regen network state idea,
Love
where
it.
there's already physical land projects distributed around the world. And we just need to come up with some common ground where it makes it easy for different people to come to the table that have the regenerative projects in mind.
Well,
I
that
sent the
brings us
link
back.
there.
That brings us back full circle to
Yeah,
generating a relational-based AI engine that is
right.
affinity mapping each other and creating the potential for the relationships. There's no social media out there that
Yes.
does that yet today. I'll get some information sent by somebody. There's nothing relational based about the process. So this is what you just said, Oscar, brings us full circle to designing the algorithms for an LLM, an advanced one, and we're going to need a bunch of memory. I don't know if anybody has access to that, but creating that decentralized platform.
And
Yeah.
can we spread that like butter across toast, like as if the toast was all like people's iPhones and each iPhone was a network? Like wouldn't that decrease the hash rate because you have like the more users in the chain with the more IoT devices supporting the node? Does that decrease the hash rate generally? Like the more people that are on the node, the more energy efficient it becomes because there's more room for processing power?
Well, it can be more
Or is that
parallel. It's a bit like what is it? Yeah, some of the decentralized servers. There's a lot of good models for that, which I think is interesting. By the way, I've got to
and
add one. Oh, go ahead.
yeah.
I was going to change threads
I
slightly.
was just going to say I'm sharing some things in the chat that I think are embodied principles that are currently being used in the world
Good.
today.
Hmm.
So I couldn't find the direct. I just got the how do you call it?
Nice
The
screenshots.
yeah, the screenshots that I had saved. So I'm just
Cool.
uploading them up. I had shared them prior in another event for um I believe it was
Good.
the BGI Nexus group.
Okay.
But the idea of like using blockchain integrated with like indigenous groups, and some people have already gotten involved in that.
Okay.
So
Cool. I've got to
those
share
are
with
some.
you. Yeah. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. I wasn't
No,
sure if you
no,
were
go ahead.
finished.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely.
Last month, we did a pilgrimage to Village Homes at Davis, near UC Davis. And this is a development that was done it was done 50 years ago. They're celebrating their 50th anniversary.
Yeah.
And they built ecologically sustainable suburban neighborhoods. And it's probably the only example I've seen that's been replicated just half a time. It hasn't really been replicated. But what I loved about it is the food forest, where actually the front yards were private, the backyards were um, communal
Community commons.
community, and
Yeah.
we had food trees, we had orchards, we had cherry trees, and
Based on
and
food, not on lawns, huh?
yeah, instead of lawns, it's really a food forest, and they had gardens
Cool.
and orchards and vineyards and a lot of collective and a lot generations of kids grew up there. And what's fascinating is to see how it's evolved and a lot of the pressures, the things that were easy, the things that were hard. And this is, an interesting example of an ecological community going 50 years on. I did interviews with both of the founders last month, and I'm like using this as an embrace and extend opportunity to say, look, here's what happened 50 years ago. And I'll tell you right now, I mean, Australia's short 1 million homes. And we're seeing 10,000 home developments go up that are completely unsustainable. There's no room for food. There's no room for, open space. It's just, and so, with the same kind of economics, I mean, there's a $5 trillion positive net present value to being green. And that with the same economics, we can build ecologically sustainable communities. And I think that's the opportunity is for us to re-architect and decentralize the car, if you will, and focus more on the community.
And it comes down to, it's really not that we don't have the technology to do what we need to do. It's our freaking behavior. Human behavior is complete mess. I mean, so we do have to really deal with the trauma issue and our behavior in order.
I think there's definitely like cultural roots. There's different narratives that are shaped around different dysporias of the human race. So not everything's good for everybody. Is an analogy somebody said to me the other day, which got me kind of giggling because it's quite true. There's a lot of, there are competing forces too that have a right to compete. So, but it's all how we define the rules of the game, right? So, and I think one of the big issues is fear and a feeling of loss of self-value or self-sovereignty, because it's not necessary. It doesn't necessarily mean control, but it means participation in the best extent of your life. So,
well, if we actually create this, do you all realize that we would be the first potential closest to democracy that's ever been? There has never been one democratic country governance in the world, unless you guys can name one, that has not turned tyrannical in the end. We don't have a history.
That's a big concern, even in a global movement like this. Is like would all it's like it's the best intentions pave the road to hell. So
that's right. That's well. Geez, that's an original. I'm going to write that one down.
No, somebody said that. Somebody else said that.
Although it's not rocket science here. You have to go through more personality tests to be a ride operator at Disneyland than you need to be president of the United States.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, that's very concerning.
And so the point
is, vote Disney.
This has been well studied with Axelrod's evolution of cooperation. And what we need to build is a resilient tit for tat approach that enables, let's say, social permaculture zones around our communities, and people come in gradually. But we've got to have a mechanism where if there's a defection, either the circle of clan mothers or the circle of chiefs can, people can be incrementally moved to outer permaculture zones, or
or new cultures, new nomenclatures, new ideological forms. They can be integrated into space that's available, like finding how do we share what common ground we have.
Right.
You could make
we need to build a little resilience.
It's like a lot I think one of the failings of empires, they're always trying to make an ontology to map over everyone else.
And we need to recognize that
success
1% of humanity. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just thinking about Genghis Khan was a success case because of the postal service.
Yeah.
So and you were allowed freedom of religion. So those kind of like, instead of an ontology of you must believe this one religion, or you must use this one form of economics, or you must believe this certain type of politics, or the authorities can act without impunity. That kind of control function is not conducive to objective natural law and thriving ecosystem processes of abundance.
Yeah. So, I mean, the applied math is well established for what we need to do to build resilience into our communities. And with a bit of resilience, I think we can avoid a lot of the pitfalls of the dark triad that is present in humanity at a small percentage level.
Promoted, if anything.
I don't know.
Is it 20% or 1%? Either way, we've got to build resilience.
2 or 20.
Because the sociopathy is attracted to power and influence and control. And so the only way to do that is to have some effective and improved governance structures at the local scale and at the network state level that can be resilient to the dark triad.
I'll argue with you on that. I think government is an afterthought. I think we depend on it to fix things, and all it's done is destroy things. And the idea of governance actually needs to be how we interact and communicate and support each other. I know it sounds all wishy-washy, but it's actually not if you get into the gist of it. And
yeah, that's
it's one of
exactly
the
what
most
modern polity
critical
brings forward.
conversations, I think, this group, the Eden group, before we build anything or think about creating anything, we've got to be talking about our relationships, our connections, our value systems, what we think we believe. The mythology of humanity has to be discussed, or we're just going to rebuild the same thing again.
Right.
Big one for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
Well, if you develop a new story, it's going to fractionate into new variations, and some people love to make satire out of all things because of the enjoyment of it. So,
Yeah, and I may have well, earlier I said governance, not government, and I think these governance principles are we've got a great example in Audrey Tang's work on modern polity.
Cool.
Can you share a link to that?
So
Yeah, I would start with Nate Hagen's interview of Audrey Tang. It's just it's blow your mind inspirational, and that's on the Great Simplification.
It's a book, did you say? I'm curious.
I'd listen to the YouTube first.
Say the YouTube again, or type it in.
Nate Hagen's Great TGS, Great Simplification, YouTube. Here it is. I'm getting the link.
Why don't you just paste it in the chat?
Yeah.
Thanks, Brian.
Sure.
Cool. Okay, so homework for me is I'm gonna make sure I'm posting the time for next week to be 3.
Cool.
I'm gonna start maybe brainstorming. I'm gonna check in with you guys on what is a good day. I'd love to fully record a call where we go deeper, focused on creating the better AI solution. I think following your inspo, Vic, we can record that, and from that recording of us talking, pass it to an LLM and see what it suggests back to us.
Great.
Good. Yep.
So that'll be fun.
By the way, Audrey Tang uses AI moderators in its groups of 10 when it does the citizens assemblies, and that is actually open source tech.
Okay, interesting.
So it might be. I mean, if we get a large enough, I mean, these were groups of 10, and so depending on the size and whatnot, we can use some of that technology under GitHub. Audrey's posted. It's on. I think it's called Pluralism. It's a book, and it's also. It has a technology for citizens assemblies and sortition.
Well, that's a big discussion. That's another one to have. I got a lot to say about that one. Government has been our downfall. I don't like that we make it a priority. It should be secondary. But again, I threw myself up for trouble by saying that. Sorry.
Those that don't design for good governance will be subject to it later. bad government later.
Anyway, you guys, I'm gonna run. This has been great. This is the meetings between meetings are always the best. That's what this was for me. So this was good.
Yeah. This has been super nourishing.
Yeah. All right. Talk to y'all later.
Okay, guys.
Take care.
Yeah. We'll talk soon, Vic.